Hey, I'm Sen Morimoto. I'm a musician living in Chicago. Um, yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. I'm Evan Raefield. I work with KRUI. Great to talk to you, Sen. Um, so for starters, first thing I wanted to ask was if your music was an animal, what animal do you see it being?
Oh man, maybe like a chameleon because I feel like it draws from so many different genres and sort of transforms a lot, even throughout the course of an album or a live set or something. It's kind of constantly changing colors. So I would
Totally.
say,
Yeah, that's a great answer. I feel like I can visualize that with your music because it very much, I think if there's one thing that you really sort of emphasize and like bring to the table with your music, it's very much you cross so many genres, and I think that's just amazing. Um,
thank you so much.
yes, of course. I think some of the different stylings that you've ventured throughout your past few records have just been incredible. Starting with, I mean, the first project of yours that I listened to was it's getting late,
Oh,
2017. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, I love that one still. I get really self-conscious about music after it's been out for a little bit, but that one, for some reason, I'm always like still happy about.
yeah. I mean, what makes you self-conscious about your music after it's been out a little bit?
I think it's just
Just
like hindsight 2020 stuff. Like it comes out and you're like, oh wow, like that was not the right take. I don't know why I thought that was the right take, but like
mm-hmm,
it found how I wish it did, or later you wish you had made different decisions about lyrics and stuff like that. But
mm-hmm.
that record was so um specific and kind of different than the rest of the albums I've put out because I didn't really intend to like release it uh officially or anything. It just sort of went up on SoundCloud back before I was really putting records.
Really?
Yeah, so it was originally one long track on SoundCloud. Every song just sort of flowed together, and there's some on there still that like didn't make it to, Spotify and other like official streaming platforms. But the original version on SoundCloud is really fun because it's just one long, almost like a DJ mix,
Yeah.
and yeah, it just felt really like purely about creating, and it's very much just me playing around with sounds, and it's super mellow. It doesn't have a lot of the sort of like in your face instrumentation as the other records, and it's just kind of about writing songs. So yeah, that one I can still listen to that one. It's hard for me to my own music, but that one's cool.
Yeah. You know, I something I personally say a lot is an artist can never appreciate their art. I know not really a comparison, but I often feel that way about my own art. Is just kind of like once you're out of that initial sort of frame of mind, it's just harder to relate and you're kind of on to the next thing. I mean, I can understand sort of where you're coming from.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. I totally feel like you probably feel this all the time, and a lot of artists too. It's just once it's not only in your head and only in your ears, then
mhm.
changes.
Yeah. Something about thoughts. I mean, when it's in your brain, it's just so transient. And it's when it's thoughts being put down onto a tangible thing is always so interesting because, everyone sort of thinks in the flow of consciousness sort of way. And it's just very much a new framing. But
Yeah,
you mentioned it was up on SoundCloud. Is SoundCloud where you first started posting your music originally?
yeah, for sure. SoundCloud and YouTube were kind of the main ways as a young person that I started getting music out into the world. I think, yeah, at the time I was just like, this is how it works. You put your song on YouTube, somebody finds it, and they give you a bunch of money, and then you live happily ever after. And it's not at all, but yeah, that was how I was putting music out.
hmm I mean, when did you start putting music out on those platforms initially?
Um, Sort of. I want to say like I started doing my solo music and really putting it out online in like 2016 or 2015, something like that. Started putting
Mhm.
some stuff online, and that's how I started like meeting people in Chicago and playing shows and just sort of getting the ball rolling in the DIY scene like that.
hmm When
Yeah,
did
probably.
you? Oh, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. No, no.
Oh,
I said probably around then.
yeah. Speaking of Chicago, I know that initially you are from Japan and then you moved to Western Massachusetts. When exactly did you make the move to Western Massachusetts?
I was still a baby when we moved to the U.S.
Mm,
We left Kyoto when I was like 8 months old and landed on the west coast of the US, and we lived in a like a Volkswagen bus for a while, and we
Mm,
drove across the country till we ended up on the complete opposite end in this little town. It's like in the middle of the woods, and it's super isolated and beautiful too, but also very, yeah, very different than life in Chicago for sure.
yeah. Did you grow up in Western Massachusetts, or when did you move to Chicago?
I grew up in Western Mass, yeah, in this tiny town until I was 19-ish, and then moved to Chicago. So like 10 years ago, I moved to Chicago.
What do you remember or miss the most about those days in Western Massachusetts, or how do you think it impacted you the most as a person, as an artist?
It's a really cool place. I mean, I was definitely super lucky to grow up there. I think, I mean, for one, the first thing is just like the nature is so vast and like all around you, and that's such a beautiful thing to grow up around. I think it gave me a lot of stillness and appreciation for that energy. But also it's become an interesting spot because like, the town I lived in is was sort of in the cut, but 45 minutes, 30 minutes, everything's about that far away from the town I live in. But once you do that little bit of a trek, there's a valley of towns in Western Mass that's called like the Five College area. So there's a lot of universities. So that made it a lot more sort of diverse, and also just like young people being creative and stuff like that was going on there, which was cool to have that balance. Like I really grew up in a place like if you saw it's so funny. It's like there's nobody around, um, but you could make a little drive out and be at a music venue seeing some interesting jazz or whatever you like.
Yeah.
So that balance was really lucky to have around for me.
Yeah. In that five college area, was there like a thriving local music scene with all the universities in the area, or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there was a lot of punk bands, a lot of DIY stuff, and at the uh, college, the state college there, UMass, there was a jazz program over the summers that I would do, and yeah, there's so many cool bands and things going on there that like I feel super lucky to have had at least nearby-ish.
Yeah. Is that where you got your training? I understand saxophone was your first instrument that you picked up. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. When I was 10, I started playing sax, and that sort of leads a lot of the music I make still. But yeah, I started taking classes in elementary school and studying with the teacher outside of that through like through maybe like the first half of high school, and then sort of just became a super DIY person. I was teaching myself all the other instruments and really just like learning from my peers,
Hmm.
and that's been another thing that I'm super grateful for, just being able to find communities of people where I can learn from folks who are doing it at the same time.
Yeah, it's a very special thing to be able to have sort of a collective of creative people to sort of feed off of and like work together to create such an interesting, I mean, product back to genre fusion. And it's just kind of like it grows exponentially, kind of.
Absolutely. I think like that's sort of been my goal, and also the prize for doing this work that I found everywhere that I go, whether it's Western Mass or in Chicago, or now I've been lucky enough to go back and tour a couple times in Japan and meeting artists there. It's really just like the best part of what we do is being able to find like-minded people and just kind of geek out about how we both are making this weird, hard to describe thing, and we don't know
Yeah.
why it means something to us.
Yeah, it's a very special thing. Speaking of that sense of community and sort of just like finding people, finding creatives, I understand you, Namdi, and oh, hang on. There's Super Records with Glenn Curran. That's the other
Yeah,
guy. What's the story there? How quick did you meet them initially upon arriving in Chicago? Did you form
yeah.
Super right away?
A couple years after I moved to Chicago, I met Namdi through just playing shows. I think he ended up in one of my shows, not knowing who I was, and we sort of got to talking and liked a lot of the same stuff, mainly like The Simpsons and whatever, silly shirts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he would come over and we started making beats and making little funny songs together. And then Namdi and Glenn started Super together, and it was initially just to put out tapes, cassettes of like bands in the DIY scene in Chicago, because there really isn't a lot of infrastructure here for stuff like that to get bands off the ground, at least. There's a
Yeah,
few
yeah.
running labels, but it's hard to get that sort of in between phase where you're working on your first album and you really want to do something kind of serious with it. So that's sort of where Super comes from, and to this day, it's still pretty much the aim of the record label. It's just sort of to get a bunch of Chicago artists or like-minded folks in other cities, even sort of just off the ground and hope to build with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an important thing. I know I personally, as being someone who's been very tuned into the music industry, that seems to be a point there in sort of artistic progression where artists kind of have a lot of trouble just sort of progressing. They hit that point of like, okay, this music thing's awesome, but how can I reach more people? How can I take the step, make this album? And
Yeah.
that actually reminds me, this new album, Diagnosis, is that the first time you recorded in a professional studio?
Yeah, it is. I've always made my music at home, just in my room with like a tiny little interface or a laptop or whatever, and everything's been super lo-fi in a way. And we still have some of that energy on this album because it's a new studio called Friends of Friends here in Chicago. Excuse me, that my friend Brock and D, my friends Brock and D have opened up, and it's I feel like it's such a nice in between space for me, sort of transitioning into working that way in a studio because it's someone I know and I trust. And, it's starting small in a way that feels really natural still.
Yeah,
But yeah, it is. It definitely brought a whole other layer of depth to the record to be able to do it in a professional space. I mean, even just to hear it on actual like monitors instead of mixing everything in my headphones and all that was
yeah.
huge for me.
I mean, I think it's especially incredible because I mean, listening to your last record, your self-titled, I mean, the like lo-fi is the last thing that comes to my mind when I listen to that record. Every song is just so lush. There's so much going on. The textures you're utilizing, the soundscapes that you're creating. I mean, it's to call that DIY is amazing. That's so
Oh,
impressive. And for
oh,
that,
no, yeah, that's so nice. I mean, it's definitely just I had been doing it for so long that I kind of figured out my way of hacking it, but it's all very like simple tools.
mhm. What are your primary tools when it comes to making your creative process? Like, do you
Yeah.
find yourself? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, no. It sort of differs from song to song and from album to album. Like the new record Diagnosis, I wrote a lot of it on guitar, which was new for me. I'm always just trying to pick up a new instrument and see where it'll lead me because I find that I write very differently depending on what I start instrument wise with.
Hmm.
So for like the self-titled album, it's a lot of keys. There's a lot of Wurlitzer and synths and different layers like that. And I think I was experimenting a lot with vocals and different textures there. And Cannonball was a lot more sort of like chopped drums, and I was working more like in the computer. It was kind of fucked up, or sorry, excuse me, messed up
Yeah. Okay.
sample-based stuff. And then for Diagnosis, the new record, it is really like I envision it as like a rock band playing on the record, even though it's a lot of me layered on there, but there's also our drummer Ryan Person and our bass player Michael Cantella and Kaina, my partner, who helped produce and sing on some of the songs. It really is just more like a live band feel,
Definitely.
which is also yeah super new for me and probably the most obviously different thing about the new project.
It was a very interesting thing because I was listening to your new record. Literally, I've been listening to it on and off all week, and it's you very much. It almost has that like rock jam, almost jam band sort of sound to it. There a lot more guitars, a lot more like guitar led melodies, rhythms, and it was
Oh,
just it was an interesting change. But I think that it I'm excited because you're coming to Iowa City this weekend, and I'm excited to see it live because I think it will translate super well, and I think it
man, yeah.
really yeah.
I hope folks in Iowa mess with it. It's cool. I really haven't been out there too much, so I'm really excited to sort of, I don't know, meet new folks, and I'm really excited to be playing with Kling too, who's like a new band. I had been looking online, like just totally lost in the sauce on the internet, finding different Iowa City bands and all these folks who weren't available, and then I found this one band that I really liked. So I hit up the promoter of the show and I was like, "Hey, this band is so good. Like they should open." And she was like, "That's me. That's my band." And I was like, "Oh, crazy. You should open." But they were like, "I just started this new band called Cling and they sent me the music and it's so, so cool." Um, and I'm just really stoked for the show. They seem like really fun and cool people. So hope people pull up.
For sure. No, I think it's going to be an amazing show. Um, but I mean, as far as touring, you've been on tour for a little bit now, and I mean, how has it felt compared to past tours that you've done?
Um, well, we toured a lot the past year with my partner Kaina's project, and it was different coming back um after, you know, we had been through the pandemic some, and it's still going, but venues opened back up and things are just different now. It's harder to get folks out to shows. I mean, rightfully so. It's so hard to feel motivated to leave your house now or feel safe enough in a venue and there's a lot everyone's battling just to like get out and do the things they love. And also everything has just gotten so much more expensive for traveling bands, like even just the things you need to get there, gas and car rental and lodging and food, it's all kind of stacked against you. So it's been hard to feel like touring is a sustainable way of living, I would say,
Hmm.
coming to it. That's probably the biggest difference. And everyone's figuring out their own way. I mean, what's interesting is that I feel like people doing the DIY touring, figuring everything out themselves, which is pretty much like where we're at, versus like even huge touring artists who, play these giant rooms and have tour buses and all that. Like everybody is having to rethink how it works because these costs and the change in how people attend shows affected everyone. So in that way, it's interesting because we're all sort of starting from ground zero. We're all sort of starting over.
Definitely. The pandemic seems to be, and I mean, you can confirm or deny, but the pandemic seems to be, even the title of your new record, Diagnosis, seems to be something that's very much thematically at the forefront of a lot of the lyricism. There was one particular series of lines that you said, I was all shook up again. I had to put the puzzle together in my head, but I was missing a piece at the end. And that very much, when I heard that, it very much put me back in the space of, being stuck in my room for months on months on months and just kind of being trapped in my own head a little bit. And I thought that throughout this record, you do it justice in a way. I think that you are able to put this sort of collective trauma that we've all kind of been through um, and artistically express it in a very relatable way.
Thank you so much. That means the world to me because that's literally, yeah, the whole point of the project really is I'm just hoping that other people feel similarly and uh, can, yeah, I don't know, just know that there's other people that feel the same way.
Mhm. And I
But
mean, sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
I was gonna say you hit the nail on the head about that lyric you pulled that's from Bad State, which is totally about being in your own head, getting out of your head so you can actually experience your life and be in the present, which is really difficult now, especially now.
Definitely, definitely. And I mean, I can only hope that touring continues to go back, but that kind of comes back to the point that we were talking about before, where all these artists who are just trying to get off the ground, get their first albums out on like labels and everything, and kind of coming up short, especially with I mean, like you're talking about tourism kind of limiting it, like wealth wise, people not being able to do it as easily. And it kind of makes me think about the economy, the musical economy as far as streaming goes, and sort of music as it exists on the internet. Because this idea of having the entire music industry, like if there's a band exists, you can find it online almost certainly.
Mhm.
And what do you think about streaming, and how do you think it's impacting music as a whole and sort of people's access to creative arts?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's such a key part of, I think, what's going on with the music industry in general. But streaming is in a really tough place right now. I think it's something that probably needs to be regulated soon because, I mean, even, very recently there have been new developments, even with Spotify or something like, which is a place where, almost a majority of people listen to music, where they're not actually sharing revenue from streams equally to artists. It depends on how many streams you get. So it's a the rich get richer situation where if you are already, whatever, a celebrity, Drake or something that gets, billions of streams, they're going to pay you more per stream, actually. Whereas, if you're just getting started and, it's hard to get music out otherwise to make any money off of, it's not like everybody can go press vinyl, everybody can buy a bunch of blank CDs and whatever, do it that way. And most people listen to music on streaming platforms, so you sort of have to it's eventually, which is really difficult. Like, it's tricky because I think it requires solidarity between artists who already are at a place where their music being taken down from places like Spotify would impact that company's pockets, really. I mean, you see, like, whatever, Neil Young and Joni Mitchell took their music off Spotify, I think, because they were upset about this Joe Rogan thing. And like, if a bunch of artists at that level did that because of the unfair revenue split, then like maybe something would happen. But it's tricky. I feel like that happens a lot with some issues. It's like maybe people are focused on like hyper fixated on one specific part of the issue.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I'm not saying they're wrong for boycotting Joe Rogan or whatever, but like it's already an unfair platform that is causing uh, wealth gap between artists. And so like that should maybe be the focus of more complaints towards Spotify. And also, I mean, on top of that, the like hypocrisy of it to then only have your music available on Amazon, which is like one of the most messed up companies in the world too. So there's a lot of just sorting out to do, I think, and sort of like figuring out what the plan is between musicians, which is really hard because you know, because of how label contracts work, it's much more difficult for musicians to start organizations like unions or anything like that. So, you know, I'm hoping, there's sort of some momentum from different things like the writers' strike and these topics sort of bubbling up more so that there can be a discussion about that. But it's a difficult, it's a difficult problem to approach.
Definitely. I think that you really gave a lot of insight into the issue with that. And I hope to see something happen in the future as well. I like to think that with all the unionization efforts kind of going in the general sphere right now, that maybe something will happen. But I mean, even artists, as in their essence as creatives, people go so many different directions all the time. I feel like it's especially difficult as people who just create art to sort of unite under one banner, just
Absolutely.
because it comes in so many forms. But yeah, I really hope to see something happen on that front as well. And thanks for talking about that.
Yeah. Thanks
Um,
for.
of course, one particular thing. How much internet access slash use did you have as a kid, adolescent, past while?
I was so not online as a kid, which was like a difficult thing for me once I got into like middle school when kids all like knew the same stuff. Everyone knew about bands like that we were supposed to be into, Blink 182 and whatever, Green Day and Panic at the Disco and stuff like that. Like I had no idea what was going on when I got there because I grew up in this tiny town, like I was saying, Wendell, which is they just got broadband internet like in 2020, I think. So we had,
Really?
yeah, forever. And so you couldn't go on like MySpace and find music, or you couldn't like YouTube stuff. There was just not, there was no, whatever speed. They didn't have the speed for it online. So I really just had my dad's CD collection, which I am super grateful for actually, because it informs so much of my musical thinking. And he had such a great collection of CDs, like, you know, everything from Motown to Queen and a lot of classic rock and a lot of jazz records as well. Once I started playing saxophone and I found his jazz collection and studied all the John Coltrane and Miles Davis and Stan Getz and a lot of also like Brazilian music and fun stuff. And then and then he had like a couple modern CDs. So the only other like modern music I knew about was like Beyonce and Shakira and maybe like I think he had a Black Eyed Peas album. And I was like, what music? Because I had never heard like new music. I was like, what is this? Oh my God. Um, and then yeah, so it wasn't until I really became a teenager that I met other people who could share music with me and be like, check it. Yeah, I can't believe you haven't heard this. Check this out, you know?
Right. But yes, I totally get where you're coming from as someone who also discovered their dad's CD collection and sort of like started go both my parents honestly. And I feel like honestly that's kind of like a collective experience in a way. It's just like finding your parents' music and just reflecting on how much that influenced you um as an adolescent and even in the present day. But what also that sort of leads me into is once people started sharing this music with you, do you think with all of the genre fusion that you sort of embrace now, all these different styles of music, do you think that part of that is a product of just all of this music that you've been exposed to? Like, are you very much a music consumer as much as you are a creator?
Yeah, totally. I think it just blew my mind to hear new music at that point, you know, and to realize, I mean, I think a big part of it too was honestly finding GarageBand. Like when my mom got a laptop, someone gave her a laptop that had GarageBand on it. I was like, oh my God, this is the craziest thing ever. So I would record like a sound on the acoustic guitar and like loop it on GarageBand. And that's how I started making music, but, or recording music. Um, and yeah, it was just sorry, I sort of wandered from your question, but back to what you were saying, it was just really exciting to hear different ways, excuse me, different ways of expressing yourself that I didn't know existed even, you know?
No, absolutely. Yeah. What are a couple acts, a couple artists that have been especially influential to you over the long term or even contemporary stuff you're really just like really into right now or over the past couple of years?
Yeah. I think when I found Outkast, that totally blew my mind. The sort of fusion on records like Stankonia between like rock and hip hop and sort of psychedelic sounds. Sorry, excuse me. Grab my little water.
Hydrate,
Gotta hydrate
hydrate or dihydrate.
or dihydrate. That's good. I'm gonna use that. Like I was saying, Outkast was hugely influential to me when I found them. I would say like what is it? Breakfast in America, that album. Who
Yeah.
is
Uh,
uh
no, wait, this is gonna drive me crazy. Breakfast in America. Is it Breakfast in America?
yeah, I'm tweaking. What is it? Oh, Supertramp. Okay, so Supertramp
Yes,
is a
yes.
that my dad loves, and when I was a kid, I just thought it was so lame. But when I got older and I listened back to these songs, I was like, oh, like I've heard these so many times that they just like seeped into how I think about music. And so many of the sounds I use, like the guitar tones and Wurlitzer sounds and even like horn arrangement stuff, comes from stuff like that, Supertramp and the band Chicago and stuff like that, Earth, Wind and Fire. Definitely like Motown chord structure stuff is a lot of where I get that. Um, but like newer stuff, yeah, like Outkast blew my mind. I remember when Odd Future started, that just blew my mind in a way that like young kids could make music and just put it out. And I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. That's amazing. You know, like that stuff really, really inspired me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've no, yeah. A lot of both Outcast and Odd Future both were like very incredible artists from I get where you're coming from.
Totally.
um and that sort of brings me onto a question about when you find yourself listening to music. I've noticed that depending on the person, people very much sort of latch on to things, different parts of music before like when they first listen. Personally, I very much latch on to the actual overall sound of like a record, whether it be the instrumental specifically or just like how the voice flows over top that instrumental, specific parts of it. Some people fixate more on the vocals themselves, the lyrics. What kind of listener do you find yourself being? What kind of things do you often find yourself picking out in music?
I focus a lot on lyrics, I think, when I'm listening. Like, yeah, probably it takes me a couple listens to really appreciate like the soundscapes that are going on. Sometimes like a nice arrangement, something kind of like clever will get my attention, but usually what makes me like stop and think is when there's like a line that someone sings or speaks that just feels like it tells the truth so well.
Mm, yeah,
Um, yeah, that's my favorite thing.
yeah. Do you have a personal songwriting highlight or a song that you just even now today, whether it be on this newest album or past albums, past projects, where you feel like you were really able, something just clicked and you were able to really just put the message you were trying to say across in a really good way? Personally, you as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, the new record I'm really excited about because I feel like I honed in on that a lot. It's really been uh, really rewarding listening back and feeling like I said things sort of like exactly how I wanted to. Specifically, maybe there's a song called Field Change on Diagnosis that's like
Mhm.
at the end of side A that feels really, I don't know, it's sort of clear about what it's trying to say. And that's a good feeling. I don't, I feel like in my past music, I sort of felt the opposite, rather. It's been super like the meanings were kind of buried, the lyrics were
Mhm.
mysterious. And on this record, I was like, I would like people to know exactly what I'm trying to say for
Yeah,
one.
especially on an album like Diagnosis, where you're very much talking about this kind of shared experience. Totally, I
To-
can see where you're coming from. And you
Totally, yeah.
mentioned a little bit about arrangement just now in your past, what you were just talking about. And that brings me to this new record. I mean, you've got this band that you're traveling with who is helping you play. First of all, are all of these band members mostly from Chicago, people you met in those days, or yeah?
Yeah, they're all Chicago folks. They're my, Chicago family here. We a lot of us have been playing together for years, maybe like yeah, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, some of us. There's a couple folks playing in the band who I recently connected with over the past maybe year and a half, and we're always trying to grow that community of people and meet new folks who like the same things and can be creative together. Um, but yeah, it really is for us. I find with my touring band and Kaina's touring band, we share a lot of the same band members, and it's always sort of the thing where we have to be able to be friends with the people we're playing with.
Yeah.
But we can really just have that sense of trust on stage, that you need um, to put on a good show, and so we definitely prioritize that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to ask, when it comes to your creative process, um, do you often find yourself writing lyrics first and then sort of just like toying around with how that would sound? Or do you find yourself like spending a lot of time in the studio messing with the actual like chord progressions, things like that, before you actually start working on a demo? Where does most of the work start? How does it progress?
It's usually like a riff or a melody, maybe a chord progression that starts the writing process. So usually I'm just like humming and playing some chords that I like. I just like chord movement. That's what I think satisfies me the most when I'm writing music, is finding ways for a chord to pass to another one. And then a melody that floats nicely over that. And then I spend more time, I would say, sort of toiling over the lyrics afterwards. Like I'll write some and I'll edit a lot, just trying to find exactly the right way to say what I'm trying to say. So yeah, definitely like the music part is more natural flowing, and the lyric part is a little more, I don't know, I don't even know, focused.
Yeah, a little more like active thinking going into it,
Yeah,
kind of.
for sure. It's less natural.
Mhm. I definitely see the smoothness you're talking about. I feel like generally, I mean, across all your records, the sense of chord progression is just so smooth. Like there's very much, it feels like a still ocean in a way, an ocean that is changing. It has deep currents flowing beneath it, but it's almost it's subtle enough to where it's not super noticeable and it just flows. And I think that that is just an amazing quality that your music holds.
That means so much to me. Yeah, totally. I love when music is like subtly moving or complicated, but you don't have to like think about it as it's happening. Sort of like a magic trick.
Yeah. Do you have background in music theory? Because a lot of your music that I've heard personally seems to demonstrate a very knowledgeable understanding, a very thorough comprehension of like these chord progressions, these song structures, these very intricate crescendos and different instruments coming together in a very elegant manner.
Thank you. I have a little bit. I mean, I studied music through saxophone mainly. That's how I learned to like play over different chord changes and sort of learned how basic music theory works. And that's really, I mean, and then I think just listening to a lot of music, old music. I mean, I think a lot of where my like songwriting theory comes from, understanding how chords move, was from learning piano, really, which I learned
Mm,
by listening to Stevie Wonder records. And I would learn all these Stevie Wonder songs because I was going through such a intense phase of being obsessed with those albums and learning like, oh, this chord, he does this a lot. Like this chord goes to this chord a lot and it resolves this way, and sort of figuring out how those movements work. And sort of just different patterns, you know, a lot of it is just pattern recognition. And that's how I got my kind of basic understanding of how I would like, how I enjoy music to move in that way. And the rest of it was just trial and error, really. I mean, I have like three official albums out, but I've been recording music, making demos and making beats and different things for I don't even know, for 15, 20 years at this point. Maybe not 20, maybe 15 years.
yeah.
Um, so like I've tried a lot of music and I've made a lot of bad music, and so I've learned through that how to make music that I think is a little better at least.
Oh, I mean, I think the very act of creating, like you're bound to create things that are not, especially as an artist, there's definitely, I think, a sense of perfectionism. And I mean, not really recognizing everything that you create. And,
For real.
but I, yeah. But
Yeah.
also, it sounds like throughout, I mean, your entire artistic journey from, I mean, what I can surmise is you've always had this intense curiosity from discovering GarageBand and having your mind blown and immediately using it to finding out these this music theory sort of by trial and error. You've always embraced this DIY sense, and I mean that's just so inspiring to see someone with limited professional background, not even professional, but limited background in music necessarily, just making their way, very much making your own sound. And I think that is just so important, especially the aspect of there's not a lot that sounds like your music. There's so much going on, and I think that's incredible.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think I finally gotten to a place where I'm sort of mature enough, at least a little bit, to recognize that there's some value in how I learned things sort of in this wonky, unique way. There was a lot of time where I felt really self-conscious about that, but now I just sort of appreciate that it's different than everything else, and I can be happy about that.
Yeah, that's very special. Um, I did want to ask, uh, hmm, putting my thoughts together.
No worries.
What about when you were finally in this recording for Cannonball? First of all, that is your first studio album. Studio, it wasn't a professional studio, but album
Yeah.
nonetheless. How did you know that it was going to manifest into that album like experience? Was there a specific, what told you that they were going to come out that way?
Um, Usually I'll be working on a batch of songs and then one song will come along that feels like, oh, like this is an album now.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell this is sort of like coalescing into something significant, you know, at least to me. I think maybe when I made maybe the first track on Cannonball Sections, I sort
Mm-hmm.
of this there's a sound here, there's something specific to me and unique about this, and I feel like I can explore that. And that album really is pretty exploratory. I'm trying a lot of different things. The songs all sort of sound different, but the same. And I guess what ties them together really is just that I'm making them in this sort of wonky way. Everything on that album's recorded with one microphone and just sort of like mixed for months until it sounded somewhat cohesive. But um, and I had no idea what it was going to do, really. It was just like it was my first record with Super, so I knew it was more concentrated as a release than I had done before, and I had been really I had been really timid about releasing music publicly. Like that's why the EP before it, It's Late, is I just put it up on SoundCloud. I didn't like promote it or anything like that because I was sort of skeptical about, I don't know, releasing music that way, being a musician full time. So I really, at the end of the day, just decided I had to try it because it's been something I've been passionate about forever, and I'm really glad I did because it led to, so many different things in my life, not just musically, but the people I've met, the community I've built, my partner, everything. It's like I met through doing exploring that musical side.
Yeah. Would you say that in that lead up to Cannonball, in when you decided to take a risk and just like go for it, would you say that that was sort of the key point where you decided I'm gonna like go for this music thing, or would you say that it may have come at another time?
Yeah, that was definitely the moment. I mean, I think I've had a couple of those because it's been tough, that was when I like after Cannonball was released and I got an offer to go play in Japan. That was when I quit my job. I was working in restaurants forever and started touring full time. And then the pandemic happened, so I started over. And this tour now with the Diagnosis shows is really like my first time doing that really again, fully being a touring musician and giving it my all like that. So
Definitely.
it comes in waves, I guess.
Yeah. You're enjoying it so far?
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's been really fun to get the songs together with a live band and just dive back into it. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it afterwards, sort of thinking about how it all went and reassessing.
Distance always provides clarity. But
Really, yes.
I'm so glad that you feel positively now, and honestly, just so glad that concerts are happening again and touring is starting to come back, and glad that you're taking a risk and getting out there and putting out music and just doing your thing.
That's so
But
nice. Thank you so much.
of course, I think just getting ready to wrap up here. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share? Any bands, artists, links, social medias you want to plug, anything like that?
You can follow me at Sen Morimoto at everything, senmorimoto.com for tour dates. Come check out a show. Definitely Iowa City, folks. Pull up. It's going to be so fun. Cling is awesome. We're playing these shows, these songs for the first time live, and yeah, I can't wait.